Our Declaration of Rights of 1689 was not only the foundation of our constitutional monarchy, but also provided the source of so many of the principles reiterated, often verbatim, in the American Bill of Rights of 1791. And those roots go even further back in history. The US Supreme Court Historical Society has calculated that Magna Carta is cited in at least 160 Supreme Court cases since 1789, not least as the foundation of the principle that executive power is subject to checks and balances.
All right, let's bring in Patty Culhane for more on this. Patty's in Capitol Hill for us. Patty, rare for such a royal speeches in Congress. What was the message here from King Charles's speech?
Well, I think it was pretty striking because, beforehand, all the commentators kept saying that the king is non-political, but he definitely went into political topics that could potentially anger U.S. President Donald Trump. And that point right there was particularly impactful because that was a bipartisan approval. Republicans stood up to cheer, so did Democrats. And the reason that's important is because critics have really said that the Republicans who control not just the House, but the Senate, have really just conceded all of their power to the president. So the fact that he brought it up in that chamber and it got that reaction, again, pretty significant. And a couple of the other areas where I think Congress really physically showed their approval on topics such as the alliance, that it's very important, you just heard the Magna Carta, that interfaith relationships are important, that 9/11 and reminding the Congress that England, the UK, and NATO stood with the United States after 9/11. In fact, he's going to the memorial in New York tomorrow. And that could be seen as a bit of a swipe at the president because he said that when it came to the Afghanistan war, that NATO members didn't really go to the front lines. That, of course, is false. But the fact that he brought that up repeatedly in this speech could be sending a message to the president. Really big applause when he said Ukraine must be defended. And he brought up the importance of climate change, obviously a very important issue to King Charles. But at the same time, this is a president who has called climate change a hoax, and his policies have really stripped away pretty much all the progressive policies when it came to tackling climate change through green energy initiatives. So it wasn't an overtly political speech, but you can definitely see that he was sending the message that the United States needs the United Kingdom as much as the UK needs the US. One line that stood up to me, he said, tell lawmakers to ignore the clarion calls to become ever more inward looking. So that could be seen as a fairly pointed statement.
And Patty, a very serious message there, but a speech punctuated with humour, something that King Charles is well known for.
It was, there were a lot of laughs in Congress. You don't usually hear members of Congress laugh at any of these joint sessions, but he did a couple of moments that stood out. He talked about when he gives a speech to Parliament, they hold a member of the Parliament hostage until he returns. The lawmakers thought that was funny. He talked about a couple of topics, but one in particular I thought was fairly funny, quoting at the beginning of the speech. Let's listen.
Our destinies as nations have been interlinked. As Oscar Wilde said, we have really everything in common with America nowadays, except, of course, language.
That is true. We did, in fact, take the U out of the word color, a few others as well. So this is a very rare moment. He's only the second British monarch to address a joint session of Congress, joint meeting of Congress, I should say. His mother, the Queen Elizabeth, did in 1991. Just a little trivia for anyone listening at home. There have been he is now the 133rd head of state to give a speech before a joint session of Congress. The first one was back in 1874. That was given by the King of Hawaii.
All right, that's very interesting. I had no idea. Thanks a lot for that. Patty Culhane there for us on Capitol Hill.